Unpopular opinion right off the hop here. I've always been a bit lukewarm to Arkane Studios. That's not to say they're a bad dev team or anything. In fact, they've made some pretty innovative and interesting games, but I've never gotten super into any of them. I enjoyed Prey well enough, but their flagship game, Dishonored, just never gripped me. So despite finding Arx Fatalis an interesting game in concept, I was a bit gun-shy to give it a try, fearing a repeat of my disappointment with Dishonored. But I've gotten enough recommendations for it at this point, and to be honest, I found the idea of the magic system interesting enough on its own to give the game a shot. And I'm super glad I did. This game was so high quality and genre-defying that even after 20 some odd hours in its world, I am having difficulty deciding how to categorize it.
What kind of reviewer can't figure out a genre?
You have the haunting underground environments and dark ambiance to put any dungeon crawler to shame, but the game is far more in-depth than a simple dungeon crawl. You have the real-life elements and interactive gameplay of an immersive sim, but there's a lack of object interactability and branching paths to really classify this as an immersive sim. There is an interesting narrative and character development to rival any RPG of the era, but also a distinct lack of character agency that usually comes with an RPG. While you could do things your own way, with side quests and exploration, the main story was extremely on rails. Even dialogue choice didn't exist here, a cardinal sin for any RPG. And with the complex magic and melee systems on offer, this game is far and above a simple hack and slash. So what the hell is Arx Fatalis? I hope you'll stick around while I unpack that. For the uninitiated, Arx Fatalis has a backstory unlike any other. Essentially, the sun supporting life on Arx has begun to fail, which of course would have been an extinction-level event. In order to survive, the many warring races of Arx banded together and spent the next 5 years moving their respective kingdoms below the surface into the old dwarven mining tunnels. Each race would be given its own level in the Great Caverns, and the dwarves themselves, being masters of underground living, would forge deeper still. Aside from the dwarves, there were trolls, goblins, and the mysterious Sisters of Aedirnium, snake women whose origin and backstory are greatly unknown, but their mastery of the arcane arts made them invaluable allies when trying to find ways to survive under the earth. Believe it or not, growing vegetables underground on a planet with no sun takes some creativity. Funnily enough, the manual also mentions orcs as one of the races in Arx, but they don't appear in the game at all. There are super muscular goblins called Goblin Lords, which I feel could have been named orcs with no detriment to the story. The orcs have been goblin washed. Hashtag justice for the orcs. Oh, and there are also rat men. They don't talk and just attack everyone with reckless abandon. I can't really blame them for being upset though. The underground was their realm, and they really had no say to all these people moving in on their space. I would also be upset if trolls and goblins moved into my attic. The story of Arx Fatalis is fine, though I think the real star of the show here is the gameplay. It had a ton of unique ideas that I would consider revolutionary for such an early 3D RPG. Even today, a lot of these systems are unique to Arx. On the immersive sim side of the house, you could do it all. Hungry? Grab some rat ribs, cook them up on a fire you've just lit, and have a feast. Want to live a more vegan lifestyle? Grab some flour, grab some water, make yourself a ball of dough, and watch the bread cook in the oven in real time. Don't leave it for too long though, or it'll burn. Have an excess of food? Why not feed the many mice in the tunnels? They would love your extra cheese. Or give some meat to the dogs and get them to follow you around. This game had that immersive quality where if you think you can do something, you probably can. Silly little additions to a game like this do such a great job of getting me invested in the first few hours when I'm deciding if a title is worth playing. More games need to have bread-making mechanics. Outside the fun cooking and animal aspects, you could also do some basic crafting in the form of alchemy. But this isn't like RPGs of today where you click on a designated crafting station and watch a giant wordy menu pop up. Instead, you would need to physically grind up the herbs, put them in bottles, then use a still to make potions. You couldn't craft weapons and armor outside one particular time. but you could maintain your own equipment on one of the many anvils located around Arx, though you probably shouldn't. Each time you repair your equipment, you would find its maximum durability would decrease, and by quite a lot if you didn't have points in object knowledge. Speaking of skill points, let's talk about the very simple, yet somehow very misleading attribute and skill system. You had 4 overarching attributes of strength, intelligence, dexterity, and constitution. Strength makes you hit harder in melee, intelligence makes your spells more effective and gives you a larger mana pool, dexterity increases your chance of crits, and constitution gives you more health and poison resist. Worth noting, the description says constitution affects wearing heavy armor. This is an outright lie. I never found a single piece of armor that required constitution to wear. Strength was the stat for wearing armors. Though again, the best armor and weapon in the game has literally no stat requirement at all, so it's sort of pointless to overly invest here. And we'd find this to sort of be a theme with the skills in Arx. You have a few that are misleading or just outright wastes of points. The stealth skill exists just to make you think this game has stealth mechanics. Ranged exists to make you think this game has a ranged system. Okay, yeah, there is a bow, but there are almost no arrows, and the damage is just not worth the effort. Intuition is another one that is really dubious in use. In theory, it lets you see hidden switches and secret walls, but you can see them just fine on your own. Moving into the at least mildly useful skills, we have Ethereal Link, which boosts your mana regen and, according to the manual, warns you of hostile creatures in your vicinity. I have no idea what that means. I had a decent investment in this skill, and I never felt I was being warned of nearby enemies. Technical skill lets you pick locks and in theory pickpocket. I never used it. This isn't Thief. Object knowledge lets you repair, which again, you should not do. Just pay the blacksmith to do it. You'll be overflowing with gold anyway. It also allows you to brew potions and identify items. It's nice to be able to make potions, but honestly, I was so flush with gold in this game, I could just buy what I needed. The item identification is useful, but probably not worth the huge stat investment to make it worthwhile. This game needs a Deckard Cain to identify stuff for us.
Stay a while and listen.
Moving right along to the definitely useful skills, we had magic, close combat, and defense. They boost magical ability, melee damage, and obviously armor class. In terms of building your character, your best bet is to build a battle mage if you want to experience this game to its fullest. 100 points in magic will allow you to cast any spell. After that point, I would just dump into close combat and defense. Speaking of magic, let's talk about it, as it's what actually made me want to play this game more than anything else. Unlike other titles, the magic system in Arx was simple, but also super unique. You needed to find runes. Each spell consisted of 2 to 3 runes. Once you had a particular rune, it was unlocked forever, and so were any spells associated with it. To cast spells, you needed to hold down the cast button and draw the associated runes in real time. A really neat system that actually reminded me a bit of Anvil of Dawn. In that game, your character also drew spell shapes in the air to cast, but there it was totally automated. Here, you're in control. There were a ton of different spells on offer here. You could do basic stuff like casting Magic Missile and Fireball, but also had utility spells like Levitate, Increased Speed, and Telekinesis. There were even summoning spells like Raise Dead or Summon Demon. You could even enchant your items, though I admittedly only did this one time in the entire game, and I only did it for story reasons. While the spells were only 2 to 3 runes in length, trying to cast them while an enemy was bearing down on you could be tense, the smallest mistake in shape spoiling the entire spell. You could precast up to 3 spells, wherein they would autocast when selected, but you did need to recast them each time they were used, so you would be redrawing the symbols repeatedly. The system was so infectiously fun that I found myself doodling spell runes when I wasn't even playing the game. During a boring meeting at work, I found myself sketching out the rune for Fireball repeatedly in the margins of my page, so that I would be ready to cast it on an unsuspecting Ratman later that night. And I got pretty quick at belting out some of these symbols. able to refresh my 3 fireballs in mere seconds, able to heal in a flash. It was all really fun, and probably one of the more interesting magic systems I can think of. Now, it wasn't perfect. In the initial release of the game, there were sometimes issues where the game wouldn't read the shape you were trying to make, adding frustration in combat when trying to get off a magic missile and constantly fizzling the spell. Luckily today we have the Arx Fatalis mod, which I played with. It fixes pretty much all technical issues with the game, and even has an option to make spells more accurate when reading shapes. Definitely recommend this for anyone wanting to play the game in the current day. It's also free and easy to install, so that helps. Melee combat in Arx was comparatively quite simple, but it did have its quirks. You could charge up your strikes by holding the attack button, the strength of your blow indicated by this little glowing gem at the bottom of the screen, and you're going to want to charge attacks. Just clicking to attack does a fraction of the damage your character is capable of. You can hold the shield, but it just boosts your AC and blocking does not exist. So in combat, your best bet was to weave in and out. The inventory in Arx was, refreshingly, pretty good. You had a set amount of spaces in your inventory and can hold as much as you could fit into that space. No weight restrictions at all. Think Diablo 2. A refreshing change from my last few games with terrible inventory systems. I did struggle with item management for the first couple of hours, but you could find more bags and eventually triple the size of your inventory. From the point I found my second bag onward, I never struggled again. Tons of room for my whole chickens. Interacting with your UI actually gave me very light System Shock vibes, wherein you had a few different modes while interacting with the game world. By default, in movement mode, you can move about like any modern game, moving with the keyboard and looking around with the mouse. Right-clicking would enter interact mode, where the camera angle would become fixed and you could move the mouse around the screen to pick up items, interact with things, and manage your inventory. Combat mode could be entered by pressing tab. In this mode, your character would lift his weapon and prepare for melee combat. The last mode is casting mode, which is activated by holding control. This gave access to the rune system, and this was where you cast your spells from. Oh, and I guess there is a stealth mode, but I never found it useful. Make sure to leave a comment on how stealth builds are the best, and I'm an idiot for ignoring them. The world of Arx itself was fairly open, but not on the level of something like an Elder Scrolls game. Like, you could pretty much go anywhere in the game after finishing the tutorial section, but the number of locations to visit was quite limited. There was only one hub city you'd be revisiting frequently, and while there was some side content and enjoyment to be found exploring in the underground, I never felt it particularly rewarding or necessary.
Not rewarding in terms of loot. They were very rewarding in terms of fun.
The game world itself is actually quite small for an RPG. Further adding to that small scale was the inclusion of a fairly robust teleport system, which was usually little more than a stone's throw away. I'm not so much complaining here, but there was a definite feeling of small scale to everything in this world. It's especially evident when you compare this to Morrowind, which released in the same year. I won't be doing much more comparing this to Morrowind, for reasons I'm going to explain later, but there it is. Arx Fatalis was excellent as a tight and narrative adventure with good mechanics, but could not hold a candle to the scale of that game. I felt there was a certain level of cognitive dissonance between what you saw in Arx compared to the story the game was weaving. Like, it talks of massive race wars and an entire civilization moving below the earth. Then you find there are maybe 20 of each race. I get it's a game, and there's a limit on what you can do, but it felt particularly jarring in such a small space. Like coming to see the king and it's just him and one lonely bard in a small room. It feels like they could have done more to make the royal chambers feel a touch more royal. Or, put in some blocked passageways to give the illusion of more people deeper in the caves. Still, it did work in regards to the style of the game. Unlike a modern RPG with a quest marker, here you were sort of given vague direction to progress the story, and then left to your own devices. So the smaller world did a lot to ensure there wasn't too much aimless wandering between quests. The whole experience is very cohesive and flows quite naturally, and the map was done well enough to ensure you could find your way about the many levels of Arx. Similarly, while there was a very robust spell system, the equipment in the game was limited. Not a lot of selection on armor and weapons to be found throughout. There are literally only 2 bows in the entire game. After the first couple of hours, I found a bejeweled sword that carried me through until the very end. I never felt there was that great weapon progression RPGs of this type are known for. Frustratingly, there are very clear best-in-slot items for both armor and weapons, and the game shoehorns them into the story. So trying to customize your character just to receive super armor of unlimited power with 0 stat requirements during the main quest can sort of feel unsatisfying. I remember finding a really cool magic chest piece that required 14 strength to equip, and I was excitedly leveling my character so I could wear it. Then just before I was able to, that story armor shows up that just blows it out of the water. It made me feel like I just wasted my stats on inferior items. It was one of the more disappointing moments in the game for me. Despite how much I enjoyed the title, there was just this feeling of wishing there was just a bit more to it. Almost feeling ashamed to have such a well-crafted narrative and game system and such a limited amount of space to utilize it in. All that to say, the gameplay of Arx is excellent. I'm just disappointed there isn't more of it. Arx starts where all good RPGs do, in a prison. We awaken in a goblin jail with no memory of who we are. In the cell next to us is another prisoner. After breaking out, he introduces himself as Kultar, and gives us the name Amshagar, meaning, he who has no name. Very creative. We can escape into the tunnels below the prison where Kultar can't follow, but he insists he'll be able to escape on his own. Worth noting above all else here, there is a completely friendly rat in this area. Every other rat in the game attacks on sight, but not this one. My theory is the rat escaped PetSmart when the son died, and has just been hiding out here in the sewers since. His name is now Shane. Anyhow, after crushing some less friendly rats and caving in the heads of a few goblins, or gobbers if you want to be derogatory, we can escape and find a human tavern. From the patrons here, we can discover that a nearby outpost has been attacked. With no memory of who we are, we head over that direction. And yeah, the place is pretty thoroughly ransacked. Whoever attacked left the livestock alone though. That was pretty swell of them. On the top floor is one wounded survivor. He lets us know that Illseed are responsible for the attack. We don't know much about the Illseed at this point, outside that they're fierce warriors who sort of look like Sith Lords. The survivor tasks us to make our way to the human city of Arx to warn the king of the attack. Our character puts up a bit of a fight, then immediately folds and agrees to do it. Amshagar is kinda spineless and just does whatever he's told. We're also given a gem dealer's license, which will allow us to enter the Goblin lands unharmed. This is our only route, as the Illseed attack caused a cave-in of the tunnels that would have normally been used. Luckily the goblins honor their word and let gem dealers through. Arriving in the city of Arx, there's a ton to do here. It's the only hub in the game, but we have NPCs to interact with, shops, a stock market, a church, and of course, the royal castle. Heading in, we meet Lord Lunshire. He's grateful for the warning of Illseed aggression, but seems sort of unconcerned about it. Hopefully he doesn't come to regret his blasé attitude. Instead, he sends us to go get trolls to clear the cave-in blocking the way to the outpost. We head back to the Goblin lands to find the trolls, who work the mines for the goblins, are on strike. Apparently someone stole their totem, and they won't help with the cave-in unless we can retrieve it.
Locate the energy totem and defend it at all costs.
I suspect the nearby goblins are likely to blame. We need to get a meeting with the Goblin King to try and locate the totem and break the troll strike. Unfortunately, the Goblin King won't leave his room. The only thing that gets in are his favorite pastries. This is the point in the game where I got those immersive sim vibes. See, a note will tell us the king is allergic to wine, so we can go to the kitchen and spike the king's favorite pastry dough with wine. Then, we just wait for the king's chef to make more biscuits and bring them to the king. Don't worry, it's a mild wine allergy, so it doesn't kill the king. What it does do is force him out of his throne room to relieve his gastro-emergency, and we're free to chat with him while he's indisposed. After explaining the need to end the troll strike, he opens up access to the goblin storeroom, and inside we find the totem we need. Before we can leave, another goblin attacks us. Turns out this goblin wanted to be king, and had stolen the totem to stop the mines operating and get the current king in trouble. Ah, the intricacies of goblin politics. Anyhow, treasonous goblin killed and totem returned, the trolls agree to go free up the passageway and we complete our quest in the goblin lands. Reporting back to Lundshire, there are rumblings of a cult dedicated to Aqua, a demonic god, conducting rituals around the city. There's a worry that these dark rituals are connected to the murder of the court's astronomer, Farlin. Since we did so well with the trolls, the king sends us to look into this cult. It doesn't take long to find Felnor, the court alchemist. Felnor was friends with the late astronomer, Fallon, and suspects Fallon was about to reveal something important before his untimely murder. Don't you just love it when main characters' names are almost identical? Not at all confusing. Most notably here, we get a note from the dead astronomer and a key to his room. The note contains a basic logic puzzle that we'll need to solve to get the combination to Fallon's safe. It's not that hard, but I felt super proud of myself when I solved it. We grab Fallon's notebook, and a council is called to discuss next steps. Turns out the one conducting the rituals is Urzog, a guard. They suspect he may be responsible for the murder. Fallon had also discovered the cult of Aqua is actively trying to bring their dark god into this world. The cult has been sacrificing people to a meteor that is made from a material called coltic, a substance from the place of Aqua's birth. This meteor is serving as an energy channel to allow Aqua to be born into this world. Additionally, Fallon was trying to contact the Nodin, the realm of gods, to seek their help in stopping Aqua from reaching the mortal realm. The Nodin would have sent a guardian to prevent Aqua from breaching into our world. The guardian would be the only one able to destroy the meteor. We are tasked to find the guardian, and to assist us in this task we're given a fragment of cultic meteor the alchemist just so happens to have, and it immediately explodes when we touch it. So, if only guardians can destroy the meteor, and the meteor explodes when we touch it, what does that make us? That's right, we were the guardian the whole time. Turns out the trip from Godland to here caused us to lose our memories. But our entire purpose in Arx is to stop Aqua. It always has been. Cool reveal. Anyhow, pretty neat that we're some sort of heavenly being, but it doesn't change much. We still need to stop Aqua, and we have a member of their cult captive. We can question Urzog to find the location of Aqua's cult and the location of the meteor. It's in a hidden passage behind the tavern from earlier. We fight our way through the cultist base and see the extent of the sacrifices they've been making to their evil god. Pretty gross stuff. Coming up to the meteor, we're assaulted by a demon. He's a pretty tough boss fight, but we eventually prevail and even free a woman they were trying to sacrifice. She's thankful and takes off, but when we try to destroy the meteor, we find it's too strong for us. Heading back to the castle for advice, we find out that Isiribus is the head of the cult of Aqua, and he leads the Illseed. So those random Illseed attacks were not random, but directed to harvest sacrifices for Aqua. Lame. Back to the task at hand, we need to find a way to shield ourselves from the power of the meteor to destroy it. We'll need 2 items, Krahos and Zohark. Man, this game has a lot of hard to pronounce fantasy words and names.
You need to work on your diction.
They're one-of-a-kind rings that were used to protect the kingdom in the past. They belong to the Order of Adernium, the Snake Women, and one of the rings is missing. Turns out both were loaned to humanity, but years ago the king and his family were attacked by a group of human rebels who stole one of the rings, as well as killing the king's wife and kidnapping his daughter. In order to get both rings, we'll need to recover one from the Order and recover the other from the rebels who haven't been seen in 20 years. Big task. We start with the Snake Ladies, who live deep under Arx. They are surprisingly accommodating, not wanting Aqua to return any more than we do. They will give us the first ring at the cost of completing their initiation ritual. Sure, why not? The Snake Temple isn't too tough. It's just a series of puzzles and tests to prove your worth. None are particularly difficult, and before long we have the first ring. Now we need to find those rebels. Wandering aimlessly, we eventually come across the woman we saved from sacrifice in the temple to Aqua earlier. She distracts us, and we're knocked out and taken captive. When we awaken, we find that the woman is the leader of the rebels. She was captured doing her own investigation into Aqua. Well, that's fortunate, I guess. She's willing to give us the second ring if we go get her a magic shield. I think you could literally just kill her and take the ring, but that's no fun, so we head out to grab the shield. It's located in a crypt under Arx. This place is full of the undead, so make sure you bring some stakes to send them to their eternal rest. Arx seems to get its monsters confused, requiring zombies to be staked like vampires to stay dead. Anyhow, the crypt is huge and full of places to explore. You can come at it just about any way you want, but you'll need to gather 6 marked stones before making it to the end. Just before getting the shield, we have to solve a puzzle. It's actually a really easy puzzle, but it's explained so poorly as to be legendary for ending playthroughs, if the internet is to be believed. What you need to do is align each of these 6 spinning symbols so the outer symbols match with the symbols found in the previous 6 rooms. Then place the 6 stones on the pedestals that rise so they match the 6 inner symbols. I struggled here for way longer than I care to admit. But with that done, we can grab the shield and bring it back to the rebels. Upon returning the shield, the rebel leader reveals that she is Aaliyah, King Lunshire's kidnapped daughter, all grown up 20 years later. She further reveals that the group she leads are not rebels, but instead known as the Sacred Dagger, a group that's actually trying to protect her from the Snake Women. All cool backstory, but really meaningless to us. With the shield handed over, we get the second ring and head back to the temple to destroy the meteor at last. The cult has been refilled with the Illseeds, and we find them to be the toughest enemies yet, but a few well-placed fireballs takes them out easily enough. At the end, we don the 2 rings and turn the meteor to dust. Aqua contacts us directly after this. Seems he's upset we destroyed his meteor, but he's not completely stopped. We head back to the city of Arx and find it under siege by the Illseed. We fight our way through, but find out the whole thing was a trap to kill us. Just before our Illseed warrior can finish us off, our buddy Kultar shows up to save the day. He's the guy from the very start of the game we saved from the prison. Turns out he had joined the cult of Aqua in some desperate attempt to restore the sun, but realized how evil the cult was and decided to help us instead. Cool. We meet with the council again, and it turns out that Acerbius is going to fuse his body with Aqua, allowing the god to enter our world. The only way to stop him is to craft the ultimate weapon. We'll need a mithril sword enchanted with a dragon's egg and dust from a meteor. Lucky for us, we already have the meteor dust, and I actually picked up the dragon's egg ages ago. During my random wanderings earlier, I'd found the dragon, and I just attacked it because it was a dragon. I guess I could have talked to it to buy an egg, but oh well, the deed is done now. To make a mithril weapon, we'll need to descend to the deepest parts of the mines, past the Ratman lair, past a giant worm nest, and into the dwarven settlement. Arriving here, it's pretty clear something horrible has happened to the dwarves. Not a single one is alive, and the place is absolutely wrecked. Moving into the foundry, the reason becomes clear as a horrifying beast descends upon us. Unfortunately, it's immune to any physical damage, and the whole forge is an anti-magic zone. We have no choice but to run away. We can lure the beast under a crusher with dwarf meat, and give it the squishing it deserves. Moments later, the beast returns for revenge, but we can once again lure it into a trap and give it the Terminator treatment. With the mines now relatively safe, we can find some mithril and craft a sword from it. Then, I struggle for like 20 minutes trying to figure out why I can't enchant it. The forge is an anti-magic zone. You can't enchant here. Oops. I take the sword slightly outside the forge, and we're able to craft the ultimate weapon. Awesome. We're almost done. On the way to Aqua's sanctuary, Aaliyah shows up again and has decided she wants to meet her father. They have a touching reunion, but the Order of Aeternium shows up to rain on their parade. Turns out Aaliyah was promised to the Snake Ladies by her grandfather, as part of the deal when the Snake Women helped the humans move their kingdom underground. They've been looking for her ever since. For reasons unexplained, they want Aaliyah to come back with them to be their queen. In order to prevent bloodshed, Aaliyah agrees and they depart. This really felt like some world building for something that might have come up in a sequel, but as far as this game is concerned, that's the end of the plot for every single side character. And yes, I am aware there are other ways this could go, but this is the way it went for me. Anyhow, all that family nonsense wrapped up, we head into Aqua's lair. There's some cool stuff in here and a lot of combat, but ultimately we reach the final chamber where Cerberus is already fusing with Aqua. He talks a lot, and then the fight begins. As far as final fights go, this one is pretty meh. He has a reflective shield, so you're sort of limited to using melee. The whole strategy is to keep him at a medium range, hit him with fully charged strikes, and heal through any damage. There's really nothing more to it. Eventually he dies. Aqua is banished, and our master from Nodin appears to congratulate us on a completed mission and return us to our own realm. As the credits start to roll, we get a scene that, if I'm interpreting correctly, shows Arx's sun is not gone, but instead blocked by some sort of asteroid field or gas or something. So maybe the world won't stay a frozen hellscape forever. It's a shame we never saw more in this universe. So many questions remain. All the reviews I read before buying Arx Fatalis said it was like Morrowind, just with worse voice acting. But it is much more than just bad voice acting. The game overall feels dry and boring. Pull out your old Morrowind disc and play it again instead. This review is worth bringing up because it seems to be a big talking point for this game. Arx released within 1 month of Morrowind, and both are technically RPGs, so it's hard not to make some comparisons, at least from an outside perspective. But if you've actually played both of the games, it just feels incorrect to really compare them like that. Morrowind is true open world, with a blank slate protagonist you build from the ground up. You can make any sort of character you want. Arx has one of 4 faces you choose, and you can distribute stats. But it's super clear within a few hours of playing that you're expected to make a very specific type of character. And while you can have some extremely limited control over the narrative, you really do seem destined to follow a specific path through the game. What I'm trying to get at here, that aside from both being RPGs released in the year 2002, Arx and Morrowind are extremely different styles of games. Whoever is going around saying, hey, if you're hankering for some Morrowind, give Arx a try, needs to stop. They're both excellent games in their own right, but they're in no way interchangeable. Also, the voice acting is awesome. Even the monotone Shigar is just great for the memes. Reminds me of JC Denton. Was it that hard in the early 2000s to make normal controls that make a game playable? Times where there is a mouse look toggle mode are long overdue since the 90s. Maybe the developers didn't get the memo. Again, this review is worth bringing up just as a talking point. Though I do want to say I disagree that the control scheme is outdated at all. I actually quite like the controls and can see them right at home in something new. But I digress. The reason I picked this review is because while I think it's unfair to say the controls in Arx are bad, it is fair to say that they're weird. When I first booted this up, I was super confused how anything worked. And again, the only thing I can really compare it to is the original System Shock. It is a very bizarre feeling to have to switch between multiple control modes in the game based on what you're trying to do. And even with my background playing retro games, I found myself accidentally opening the inventory or accidentally sneaking repeatedly in the opening hours of the game while I figured it out. But what I will say, just like System Shock before it, the control scheme actually works super well once you get used to its uncanny nature. Where I was struggling to cast a simple magic missile at the start of the game, by the end I was launching chain fireballs like it was second nature. If you're new to the game and decide to give it a try, give the controls the fair shake they deserve before abandoning the game and chalking it up to retro jank. You'll thank me in the end. So I started this video questioning exactly what genre Arx really is. It has the gloomy environments and ambiance of the best dungeon crawlers. It has the complex magic and involved leveling system of a good RPG. The narrative puts a lot of adventure games to shame, and the interactivity and UI screams immersive sim. But while it has all these things, none of them are the true focus, and none of them quite take the lead to allow you to point at it and say, that's it, that's what Arx is. I think what I can say, after many hours of play and similar amounts of time in introspection, is that Arx is its own thing. It's an RPG with elements from many different genres that mesh together to create something truly special. While none of the aspects that make up its being take the lead, none of them lag behind either. Everything works competently and flows together to make one uninterrupted fantasy experience. If I can make one complaint about Arx, it's that I wish there was more of it. See you in the next video.